When the Tide Comes Home, Part 1. The mornings in San Isidro always began with the sound of the sea. Before the sun lifted its first edge over the horizon, the waves would push and pull against the shore in a slow rhythm that felt like breathing. Luca woke to it every day. That and the smell of salt trapped in the wood of his house, the sound of his father humming while mending nets. They lived close enough to the water that the air rusted everything, even their laughter. He liked mornings best. The world still felt gentle then, and the wind that came in from the ocean carried no warning. His father, Thomas, was a tall man with lines around his eyes from both sun and kindness. He would nod at Luca and say, "The tide teaches patience, Anak. You can't hurry the sea." They spoke little while they worked, letting the sounds of the day fill in the spaces, the squeak of rope, the clink of glass floats, the distant cry of gulls that had long since learned the smell of fish from kilometers away. When the sun rose fully, Luca and his friends would run barefoot down the shoreline, racing the waves. He was 13, old enough to help his father, but still boy enough to dream of boats that could cross horizons. Sometimes when the light hit the water just right, he would imagine that the sea stretched all the way to a place where storms never came. He didn't know that far across that same ocean, in a northern country of bicycles and canals, a girl named Nora was drawing waves she had never seen. Nora's mother called them breathing lines. At 8, Nora would sit on the kitchen floor with her pencils spread out like shells and sketch the movements she saw on her mother's computer, swirling blue models, currents folding into one another. Her mother, Elise, was a civil engineer who studied the language of water. She spoke of deltas and breakwaters, of designs that learned from nature instead of fighting it. "Water is honest," she used to say, her Dutch vowels soft around the words. "It shows you where you've gone wrong." Nora never really understood, but she loved the way her mother talked about the sea, as if it were something alive, not dangerous, just misunderstood. Her father was different. He kept maps on the wall and scheduled everything down to minutes. "The world doesn't have time for poetry, Elise," he'd say. And Elise would smile and reply, "Then the world should learn to wait." The arguments were never angry, just constant, like background noise in a house that always smelled faintly of chalk dust and rain. When Elise left for her final field trip, Nora stood at the door holding a drawing she'd made, a house on stilts with her mother's smile inside. "I'll bring it back with me," her mother said, folding it carefully into her notebook. "Maybe the sea will approve." That was the last time she saw her. In San Isidro, the wind changed. It began as a whisper, then a murmur, then a voice that refused to quiet. The fishermen watched the sky darken day by day, the horizon thick with bruised clouds. By the third night, the radios were crackling with warnings. Signal 4, super typhoon incoming. Luca's father secured the boat, double knotting ropes with hands that shook only slightly. "We'll ride it out," he said. "We always do." But the sea was different this time. It had the kind of stillness that comes before violence. By evening, the wind had turned the palms inside out. Sheets of rain slammed sideways. Luca and his mother crouched under the table, the walls trembling around them. He heard his father shouting outside, the door bursting open, a flash of light, and then nothing but the roar. The world became water. In Delft, Nora watched the storm unfold on television. The news anchors spoke of devastation in words that didn't seem real. Thousands displaced, communications down, international aid requested. Her father turned off the TV. "She knew the risks," he said softly, as if that excused the silence that followed. Nora didn't cry at first. She sat at her mother's desk instead, opening the notebook she'd left behind. The drawing was still there, folded, untouched by weather. For days, she listened to the hum of rain against the windows and imagined the sound of waves she'd never heard. When the call finally came confirming the loss, she went to the canal outside their house and threw one of her sketches into the water. It floated, wobbled, and slowly sank. She whispered, "If you're out there, bring it back," but the water gave no answer. In San Isidro, when Luca finally woke, the world had changed shape. The storm had scoured the village into fragments, walls torn apart, trees uprooted, boats snapped like toys. The air smelled of salt and mud and iron. He found his mother alive, clinging to a doorframe. His father was gone. The next days blurred into a fever of motion. He helped dig, lift, carry. The soldiers came, then journalists, then the white and orange ship with its painted flag, the Aurora. From it came engineers and doctors, people speaking languages he didn't know. Among them was a woman who carried rolled blueprints and moved with quiet certainty. She smiled at him, the corners of her eyes lined with exhaustion and warmth. "You speak English?" "A little," he said. "Good," she replied. "We'll need your help." Her name was Elise van der Meer. They worked together for weeks. She taught him words, foundation, structure, elevation. He showed her where the tide reached highest. Sometimes she'd pause to stare at the sea with a kind of reverence and sadness, as if it were both question and answer. "My daughter draws the ocean," she told him once. "She says it looks alive." Luca nodded. "It is." When she laughed, it sounded like wind through bamboo, light, passing, real. The rebuild took months. When it was done, the villagers held a small feast. Rice, fish, and songs played on dented guitars. Elise stood at the edge of the square, watching the children dance. Before she left, she handed Luca a folded note. "The sea always remembers, so must we." He kept it in a jar under his bed. When the Aurora sailed away, he watched until it was just a white line dissolving into horizon. Years stretched like tides. Luca grew taller, leaner, quieter. He studied carpentry through an aid program, learned to draw simple plans, then complex ones. His hands stayed scarred but sure. Every year when storms came, he helped rebuild the roofs first. He never left. He built houses that breathed, bamboo walls that let wind pass through, stilts that bent instead of breaking. He called them Elise houses. Sometimes, on still nights, he'd take a carved wooden boat down to the shore and set it adrift with a candle inside. He told no one why. In Delft, Nora grew into the life her mother left behind. She studied civil engineering at the same university, reading papers that cited her mother's work. Her notebooks filled with sketches of deltas and levees, but in the margins she still drew waves. Professors praised her precision. "You have her hands," they said, but she didn't want her hands. She wanted her voice. After graduation, she joined an environmental NGO. They sent her to analyze flood maps, to design community plans, to lecture about resilience. Yet she felt, always, that she was talking about ghosts, models of places she'd never touched. When the invitation came for a global conference in Lisbon themed rebuilding the living coast, she hesitated only a moment before saying yes. She didn't know what she was looking for, only that the sea was calling again. Lisbon smelled of citrus and salt. The conference hall buzzed with languages, banners, polite laughter. Nora stood by a display of bamboo housing prototypes, tracing the smooth surface with her fingertips. A voice behind her said, "Beautiful, isn't it?" She turned. A man stood there, sun-darkened skin, linen shirt, a badge swinging lightly from his neck. His smile was warm but careful, the way people smile when they've learned to wait before speaking. "It is," she said. "Feels alive." "Because it was," he replied. "We built the first one in my village after the typhoon." She looked at him. Something in his voice, the steadiness, stirred recognition, though she couldn't place it. "You're from the Philippines?" "Yes," he said. "Luca," she took his hand. "Nora." Their eyes met, and the noise of the hall fell away for a heartbeat. That evening, the conference opened with speeches about adaptation and resilience. Luca sat a few rows away from Nora, listening without writing. When he finally spoke during Q&A, his voice carried like calm water. "You can't build against the sea, you build with it. When you listen, it tells you where to stay." The words sank into her like recognition. Her mother had said almost the same thing once. After the session, she found him in the courtyard. "You speak like an engineer," she said. He smiled. "I'm a carpenter. Same thing some days." He laughed, "Except when the wood refuses." The sun was setting, turning the cobblestones gold. For the first time in years, she didn't feel out of place. They met again the next day for lunch, then for dinner. The conversation drifted easily from work to memory, from the way storms sound before dawn to the strange quiet after loss. When he spoke of the typhoon that had destroyed his village, his tone carried neither bitterness nor pride, only truth. "My father didn't make it," he said, "but a woman came with the relief ship. She showed us how to rebuild differently." Nora's heart slowed. What was her name? Elise Vandermeer. She froze. That's my mother. For a long time, neither spoke. The city moved around them, waiters clinking glasses, the low thrum of distant traffic, someone singing faintly from a nearby street. When she finally found her voice, it was barely a whisper. She saved you. He nodded. She saved us all. Her throat tightened. I never knew where she was working. She never said much, just that she believed the sea could learn to be kind again. They sat in silence, the kind that hums with everything words can't hold. Later, they walked along the waterfront. The moon trembled across the Tagus River. She used to write letters to me about tides, Nora said. She said they were promises, that what goes out will come back. She was right, Luca said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small glass jar. Inside was a folded yellowed paper. The sea always remembers, so must we. Nora touched it gently, her fingertips trembling. She wrote this, she whispered. I know, he said. I kept it. She looked at him, tears bright in the low light. Why? Because it reminded me that loss doesn't have to mean the end. For the first time in 15 years, Nora let herself cry. Not the hard kind, but the soft one that feels like release. He didn't reach for her hand, but she knew he would have if she'd asked. When the conference ended, they met one last time at the pier. You're flying tomorrow, he asked. Yes. You? Back to Manila, then home. She hesitated. You said you build houses that breathe. Do you ever build bridges? He smiled. Maybe this time. They stood there side by side, the tide rising slowly beneath them. Neither promised to stay in touch. They didn't need to. When she boarded the plane the next morning, she carried with her a small glass jar, a gift from him, empty but for a single grain of sand. As the clouds closed below her, she realized the sea had kept its promise. The tide had begun to return. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure to come back for part 2 and have a wonderful day.